What's up you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jenny and I'm that props girl, and today we are going to be talking about Rodgers and Hammerstein's production of Cinderella. I recently saw this in Sydney, Australia, and it was honestly amazing. To say that I loved this production is an understatement. I adored this production. I was honestly not expecting to love this show as much as I did, and I'm so keen to share with you my thoughts on the set, the props, the overall production, and all of those amazing elements that go into making a show what it is. So if you are keen to see that, then stick around. Be sure to smash the like button because it lets me know you want to see more content like this, as well as consider hitting that subscribe button and bell so that you don't miss a single one of my uploads, and it also helps me to grow on the platform. And with all that said and done, let's jump straight into this video. Firstly, I would just like to start off by saying this show was so beautiful. Honestly, it was so wonderful to walk in, and we sat second row, so we were very close, but it was very open, so there was no front curtain, and you just walked in and you basically saw this forest set. But what I loved about it was from the get-go, you could tell that this was a classic staging, that there wasn't going to be much technology. I don't mean like there were not tracks used, there were not, you know, lighting and lots of stuff. What I mean is there is a tendency to use nowadays a lot of LED screens and all that sort of thing, and I think they're honestly amazing. Sometimes they are so effective. In Frozen, for example, it's an amazing medium to use, but I will admit that I don't think that it suits every single show, and honestly, this show didn't need it. So it was really beautiful to see a show that was classically staged with set that was very obviously real, and it had been made out of wood and all of those sorts of really strong materials, and you could tell that it was just the sort of set and scenic design that, you know, you used to see a little while ago and you don't see so often now. And so for me, I was already excited when I walked in because I went, oh my gosh, wow, this is, you know, a classic staging. And I know that's a nerdy thing to love, but I really enjoyed it. Also, it gave me sort of ballet vibes. So if you've ever seen a ballet, they have the set and the scenery that is there to set the scene. But it just sort of gave me that sort of classic vibe, because ballets are usually classic stories that are very old stories. And so it had this old worldy sort of feel. It was just so stunning. And also the scenery, and I'm going to use the trees as an example, the detail on the trees, you could see it. And it was so beautiful because somebody, and set dresser, set designer, scenic artist, props designer, probably one of those people went in, and you could see these were not just trees. So they were quite obviously flats, which is a set piece that's flown and that sort of thing. And they say flat because they're quite flat, but they don't look two-dimensional. You could see that there was texture. It was not just like it was printed. It was painted. There were layers. It was like looking at an oil painting with like layers upon layers upon layers. So you had the texture that had been carved out of these flats to make it look like it was a real tree. It looked like real bark. There were vines that had been attached to it. There was moss. There were little flowers. There were little nooks and notches in the wood. And it was those sorts of details that made you think, wow, like I'm really in a forest. And the same thing was carried through the entire show. So you had a wall that was brick, and it looked like higgledy-piggledy bricks that had been put together. And the house that was there, you know, you could see that there were proper tiles on the roof, and these were not real tiles, but they would have been pieces of wood that had been painted to look like tiles. And everything just had this amazing sense of realness. And it's just something that you don't see very often anymore. I know why. I understand why. But when you do see things in such grandeur and such detail, it's just amazing. And I very much went into this in my Mousetrap review because it was the same thing there. To see a set that was so grand and so glorious and so well put together and detailed, honestly such a privilege because you just don't see it very often anymore. And that's not to say, you know, set design is not as good as it used to be. There's just more things that you can consider and use in this day and age now. So yes, the amount of detail in this show was honestly incredible. I have never seen anything like it. I just sat there in awe, and the props also played an incredible role in this show. There were so many props because, you know, everybody had an invitation to the ball. There were also these cute little animals which came out, and they were hand puppets which came out of those trees, and they were utilized in the set. And there was obviously the shoe, and there were these pieces of glass which were necklaces for the ugly stepsisters. And there were just so many little things that were utilized in the show. And I just sat there and I thought, wow, if you took out all of those props and you took out all of the little details that went into the set, so even if you still had the painted set pieces, but you know, you didn't have all of the props to fill all of that, it just wouldn't have the same effect. And it's one of those things that you just go, wow, props really made that show. And it was just a little thing that just made me so proud. I also have to say the costuming was incredible. The dresses that all of the girls were wearing were insane. The quick changes that happened on stage were brilliant. Honestly, you had such clever costume changes and just, oh, I can't get over them. And the detail again in the costuming, it was just so lavish. And that's the thing, you know, when you do a show that's set in another era, you know, clothes that we wear today, they don't have as many layers. They don't have all of the grandeur that you used to have in a ball gown, for example. And ball gowns made up half of this show. And also even the townsfolk, again, it's a lot of layering. And I think that that's one of the things that just goes so unnoticed. And I say this quite often in terms of design in any area. Again, I use the analogy of an oil painting. It is like an oil painting. It's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers that build up that texture. So if you just had that set, but you didn't have the costumes and you didn't have the lighting, and you didn't have the soundscape and all of the other things that are involved in putting together a production, it wouldn't have the same effect. And that's the beauty of theatre, is that it's all of the departments working together to do an amazing thing. Another thing as well, because the show was so well done in terms of believability, when there were moments, and there were moments where, you know, you would see something go, oh, well, I know that's not real. You forgave them. And like, I don't mean like, oh, how could you do this? It was like, you were already sucked into this world. And so when you saw the horse and carriage, for example, well, the pumpkin carriage and the horses, they weren't real horses. Obviously, we understand why. And to do what they did for Warhorse, for example, and the mechanics of that, this is a lot of stuff that's not needed. But the horse and carriage, they weren't real. They weren't moving. You lost it. You didn't need any of that because everything else was so real. You can get away with it. And so I think that there is a balance between, you either make it look completely fake or completely real. But sometimes if you've made it look so realistic, you can get away with it with a few little things that you like, the audience will just accept it. And I think that was really great. And when I talk about layers of costuming, I'm going to use the men for an example. So, you know, you would have the pants, you would have the boots. That's obviously 2 layers. But, you know, on the top half, you would have an undershirt, a vest. Sometimes you would have like the ruffled collar and a jacket. And if they were a person of importance, they would have brigading as well. There were so many layers that went into all the costumes, and you just go, wow. But that's what you need to do, because if you're talking about royalty, and especially royalty set in another era, there were a lot of layers. And that's the amazing thing about the incredible costumes and just the show in general. The attention to detail was surreal. Honestly, I can't fault it. It was so good and so incredible. They were also really clever for the fact that every other girl in the ballroom scene basically had color, and they were very vibrant. And then Cinderella was wearing white. And that's not to say that, you know, white, that's not to take away from that, you know, white is a symbol of purity and all those sorts of things. But it was just beautiful because the palace was also very white. And so I love the fact that they didn't put her in color, and they didn't you know, make her stand out in that way. They kind of made her like almost juxtapose it, like she was blending in a way but also not. And yeah, it was just really clever. All of the color choices that they used were very, very specific. And again, it's one of those things that you could tell that the design of the entire show was very well thought through and very well put together. And I would also like to talk about the lighting, which was very well done indeed. I loved the lighting. I also appreciated the fact that they did a very good job of, when you're in the forest scenes, the lighting was very scattered. So all of the lighting above made it look like it was a canopy, like it was light coming through the filter of trees. Because if you're in a forest, you do not have direct lighting because it's going through branches and all those sorts of things. So they had very clever use of shadow, very clever use of, you know, different gobos and things like that to make the light scattered, and that was incredible. And it was just very well done. And I also loved the use of color in terms of the lighting. There were a lot of purples as well. And purple is one of those beautiful colors, you know, one, it symbolizes royalty, but you know, it gives warmth, it gives vibrance. It also complements the white very well in Cinderella's dress. So there's that as well. It's a very clever color in terms of doing, like, example, a nighttime scene, but you don't want it to be like too cold or too dark. Like if it's an upbeat sort of song, but it's set at nighttime, using purple is a really safe option there. I must say it was beautiful as well to have the richness of the sound of a full orchestra. Honestly, it's so rare you get a full orchestra anymore. And again, that's not to say we shouldn't have shows that don't have full orchestras. It's not always needed. If you're doing a production of Footloose, the likelihood of you needing a full trumpet and brass section is extremely low. But because of that, and because it is so rare, it was just like, oh wow, like, oh, it just sounded so rich. And the sound in general was very, very good. And I mean, I know that you expect the sound to be good, but just in general, like the soundscape of the theater that we were in was very, very well done. And I honestly loved this production so much. I cannot get over the incredibleness of it. And I know that's not really a word, but it's just amazing. And you know, the beauty of it. I love the fact that they had the beautiful trees through the entire show, and they just sort of wove the castle into that. And I think it's very clever how they did the story. And I also love the fact that Cinderella, our Cinderella, was not played by the stereotypical white woman in a blonde wig. We had a different Cinderella, and she was absolutely incredible. The story did not change at all, and why should it? It's one of those things that, and I've spoken about this so many times this year, and I went into details with it in my Trends for 2023 video. There's a car going past that clearly needs a new fan belt, but please ignore that. The inclusivity and actually broadening our horizons for what is the new norm for theatre and not having a whitewash on stage is so refreshing. And I say thank you for the director and everybody for actually casting people who are not white in the leads, and I absolutely love that. It was very, very good. It did not take away from the story. It was just perfect. And I honestly, as I said, I can't fault this production. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life, and I wish I could have gone to see it again. That's all I have to say on Cinderella. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments if you do like when I do these little reviews of shows, and hit the like button if you did enjoy this video, and consider hitting that subscribe button and bell so that you don't miss a single one of my uploads. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.